What is up, my friends? Welcome back. It is March 13th, 2019, and you already know this. This is the A-Side Live Chat Podcast. I hope all you guys out there are having a wonderful start to your week. We appreciate you so much for joining us today. And as always, I'm joined by my guy here. He knows he needs no introduction. He is the hardest working man in the business. He is the California King himself, Mr. Marc Raimondi. What's up, buddy? How are things?
Good to see you back, healthy, not vomiting, fresh as a daisy, with that enthusiasm, that trademark Shaun Al-Shatti enthusiasm.
I know. I've been able to.
Good to see.
I've been able to eat full meals now for going on close to a week. It's been great. I've been enjoying myself.
That's pretty impressive. I want to say that the A side helped lift you back to health last week, and now here you are.
I think you can take a little part of that credit for sure.
Yeah, I think so. I'll take the full credit, actually.
Well, I got to rep my Phoenix Suns because they are actually winning for once. I get this like once every 3 years, so I got to enjoy it. How are things going over there on the West Coast for you?
West Coast is fine, beautiful day, but the New York Giants, my New York Giants, what are you doing? You traded Odell Beckham? Really? Really? Okay. That's a bold move. Bold move. Let's see how it works out. What the hell? God.
I love it. I love it. I hate the New York Giants, and you guys are basically the Phoenix Suns right now. You're terrible.
What are you doing?
I eagerly
regional talent. Jesus.
I eagerly await you guys basically wasting the entirety of Saquon Barkley's career. But that is neither here nor there.
Let's stick with 38-year-old Eli, though. It's cool. That's fine.
Well, hey, guys, we have another loaded show for you today. Conor McGregor got his annual arrest out of the way early this year. So, hey, maybe that's it for the year. We also had an action-packed night on Saturday with UFC Wichita, and now there is a sneaky good UFC London card approaching this week. Plus, there were a bunch of surprising fight bookings since the last time we talked. You got Anthony Smith versus Gustafsson, Yoel Romero versus Jacare 2. BJ Penn is back. The possibility of Artem Lobov versus Paulo Malignaggi in bare knuckle, that has entered our life. All of that and more on today's show. But as we always say about this time, this is your guys' show. So we'll talk about whatever you want us to talk about. You can ask us a question on the MMA fighting page below. Any question that gets 3 recommendations, those will turn green and get priority. Or ask us on Twitter using the hashtags the A-Side and chat rappers. Replay this show goes up immediately on YouTube. Also, you know the drill by now. iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, SoundCloud, Stitcher, wherever else you get your pods. And Marc, we have about 4,000 green questions today. So we're going to blaze through as many as we can. I know you have a heart out because you're talking to Darren Till later today, but we're going to try to get through as much of this as possible. Are you ready? Let's do this.
I'm ready. Let's knock these out.
All righty. Well, hey, we are starting on the MMA fighting page with our good friend Lucian, who wants to know about Darren Till. He writes, Darren Till still fighting at welterweight. Brightest spring days for the both of you. I love the intros. They're always so friendly, especially for the first question. It's nice to get such a friendly intro on the first one. I realize that you are excited to discuss McGregor's out-of-the-cage actions, but my question concerns the UFC London main event between Darren Till and Jorge Masvidal. While the fight itself is intriguing, I am still kind of shocked that Darren Till is taking fights at welterweight due to his public issues with the weight drop and very difficult journey back to title contendership. Why do you think he is staying at this weight class instead of taking his chances at middleweight, especially since the top fighters there are more striking focused and might suit Till's strengths better? So Marc, let's jump right into this weekend. I mean, UFC London, it's actually a sneaky good card. Like I said, that main event is fire. Darren Till versus Jorge Masvidal. Let's start where Lucian started. What do you think Darren Till is doing staying at welterweight? Is that a mistake?
I don't know if it's a mistake or not. It seemed like he made weight in a fairly safe manner for his fight with Woodley back in September. Now, I think that the future is still probably a 185 for Till, but if he can make the weight, I feel like he probably believes that he has an advantage of that weight because he is just a monstrous human being. He is a gigantic 170 pounds. He walks around, I think, over 200 pounds, right? He's a really big guy. And I think that he feels like it's an advantage. He has a lot of power at that weight. And frankly, I think the thing is that the UFC keeps offering him fights at 170, not at 185. So if opportunities are there, yeah, I mean, I get it. And the division is a whole new division now. There's a new champion. It's Kamaru Usman. It's not Tyron Woodley, the guy that finished Till. So that kind of gives him new life in that division. I mean, you could theoretically see Darren Till fighting for a title before long, where as if Woodley was still the champion, that wouldn't happen. So I think that I think he's gonna probably squeeze as much potential out of welterweight as he can, and then possibly move on to middleweight, where there are guys in that weight class that are smaller than him, that are among the elite. Talking about Kelvin Gastelum, Robert Whitaker, and even Israel Adesanya. I mean, these guys are comparable in weight to Till, if not smaller than Darren Till.
Yeah, I think one thing you mentioned there is probably the most important aspect to all of this, which is it really is a different division today than it was 2 weeks ago, right? Because 2 weeks ago, there is no roadmap at all for Darren Till to get back to where he wants to get to. I mean, Tyron Woodley basically demolished him without him landing a single strike. That is a hard one to come back to. But now, I mean, Kamaru Usman is at the top. Darren Till has had a little bit of back and forth with Kamaru. There's a little bit of story there. He could very easily be reinserted in this title conversation with even just a win this weekend over Jorge Masvidal, no?
Absolutely, 100%. I mean, also he has the charisma and the ability to get fans excited that could put him in that conversation quicker than most in that division.
Also, I think we have to note that Ben Askren is going to be out there in London all week, just causing trouble. I think he's doing a Q&A even. So it is another big weekend for the welterweight division. How do you like this fight for Jorge Masvidal? What do you see? What can he get out of this?
I mean, look, Masvidal, this is no easy out for Darren Till. Masvidal is extremely well-rounded, and I think you might see him wrestle a little bit. I know that Masvidal is a guy who likes to stand and bang 100%. He comes from a street fighting background, backyard fighting in Miami. So obviously he likes to stand and bang, but what people still don't realize about Jorge Masvidal is that he's super well-rounded. He's got great grappling. He's got good wrestling. And I mean, if that fight goes to the ground, or if it gets into grappling, into scrambles, Masvidal has the advantage over Till. Now, Till is going to be a much bigger guy because Masvidal is a former 155er who has had success at 170, but he's going to be on the small side compared to Till. But I mean, I would never ever count out Gamebred in any fight.
Yeah, and this really is. I mean, this is the first time we're seeing him since I think November of 2017. And I think very quietly, I didn't even remember it until I looked at it, but he's coming in here off back-to-back losses.
That's right.
So this really does feel like a sort of crossroads make or break type of fight for Jorge Masvidal at this 170-pound class. I mean, if he gets 3 straight losses, if he goes out and stumbles against Darren Till this weekend, kind of feels like his chances to advance in that title picture are over. Or am I wrong?
Yeah, no, most likely he would probably. I wouldn't be shocked to see him move down to 155 again. Also, he's another one of those guys that 165-pound division would be huge for. I know we talked about it ad nauseum, but he'd be on that list of guys who'd be contenders at 165. But on the other hand, Shaun, I mean, if he beats Till, all right, here's a fresh new possible contender in that division that can go on to maybe fight an Askren or someone like that.
Yeah, and Ben has already called out he wants the winner of this fight, regardless of who it is. So there definitely is something set up for both of these men, because I could see that happening.
Yeah, the division with Askren in the mix makes it 10 times more interesting. It's already a great division. It's a loaded, stacked division, but Askren kind of talking crap and he kind of elevates everyone else's profile when he talks crap to them in a weird way.
Well, me and you are not going to be on site for this, so we're not going to be able to make picks. So who you you leaning towards in this?
I'm leaning toward Till, but I can see Masvidal certainly winning. And we're not on site, but make sure you follow Pete Carroll on Twitter and anywhere else he might be, because he'll be on site beginning tomorrow with Media Day, and he's one of the best. I mean, I love Pete. Great coverage out of the UK and Ireland and Europe.
Absolutely. And go plug the Eurobash podcast. It is always sensational. Another good episode this week. Check out that. I'm going the opposite way of you, man. I'm feeling a Gamebred moment. I think that I think he's going to come out there and surprise some people. And I think he maybe has a couple of tricks up his sleeves. It feels like he knows something that we don't. But it's a big weekend, man. It's a big fight for the welterweight division. A lot could happen. And I know Ben Askren will be there along the way, enjoying him some London.
Yeah, we'll be enjoying him, I'm sure, from afar.
Well, hey man, let's keep things moving. Next up, coming from the MMA Fighting page, is someone wanting to know, or is one of your favorites actually, Paulo Costa. And this question is coming from Hefe01. Is there any news on why Paulo was pulled from the card? He is, of course, referring to the fight that was supposed to be Paulo Costa versus Yoel Romero, ends up being Romero versus Jacare 2. He writes, does that seem odd, or does seem odd that he looks like a professional wrestler and Hulk Hogan let the cat out of the bag on that one? They're all on steroids. And he used the wrong there. I would never accuse him personally, but his physical gifts are either superior genetics or he has some pharmaceutical help. After hearing the accusations from Yoel Romero in a mild retort from Paulo himself, things aren't adding up. Paulo claims no failure, but doesn't seem to know why he was pulled from the card himself. So, Mark, I mean, this was an interesting development. I don't think it was one that either of us saw coming. That fight for a long time now has been Paulo Costa versus Yoel Romero. Hopefully for UFC Miami, ends up turning to UFC Fort Lauderdale, whatever they want to call it. We don't end up getting that fight. Now it's Jacare versus Romero 2, a rematch. I will admit that I was disappointed with that turnout. Obviously, I will watch Yoel Romero do anything in the world. I mean, this is just a fascinating guy. But this wasn't the matchup I was looking for. What do you make of this question of Paulo Costa and his status?
Yeah, and if you remember, this is the fight the UFC wanted going back to UFC 230 at Madison Square Garden. They targeted it for that, and Romero wasn't going to be healthy for that. Then they wanted it again in January. Romero couldn't do that, I believe, because he was going on the reality show, which we know now he's off the reality show. Unfortunately, I would love to see every week Romero on some kind of a reality show doing something or other. It is kind of strange, and we don't have the real answer. We don't know why Costa is not in that fight against Yoel at UFC. I think it's called UFC Sunrise now. I don't even know what. I have no idea. It's UFC South Florida as far as I'm concerned. I don't know. I have no idea. They're denying that it's a USADA thing. His team has said that there's another big fight that the UFC is planning for him to be in, which is very possible. It's very possible. Obviously, he's a guy that the UFC thinks could be a star. Could it be a fight maybe on that card in Rio? They could use some more firepower in Brazil. So they're denying it. And until the UFC and USADA say something about this potential doping violation or not, we just don't know. Remember, the last year they made that policy change where they're just not going to talk about these things until after that investigation, after that adjudication process with USADA is over. So it's possible that it's going on. They're not going to say either way, but it's possible it's not. So I really don't know. I mean, the one thing I will say, Shaun, is that if indeed Costa is going through an investigation with USADA, the fact that someone spilled the beans to Romero's team about that is bad form. That's real unprofessional. If that is the case, that's what Romero said, right? That's what Romero said. He said someone from the UFC told him or his management team that, yeah, Costa failed the drug test or he's going through some kind of issue with USADA. They shouldn't be doing that. If they're gonna stick by their policy and not make those things public until the conclusion of this process, then they shouldn't be going to another fighter. That's even worse almost, because then it gets to the public secondhand, which is what's happening now, and it just leads people to draw conclusions and speculate, and that's not good, and that's not what that new policy is supposed to be there for.
Yeah, and this is sort of the Pandora's box that I think that new policy opened. And the UFC was kind of in a damned if they do, damned if they don't situation, because with the old policy, obviously they would make the announcement and then everyone would rush to judgment, and then everyone would call somebody a cheater for months and months and months, then say they got exonerated. They've already gone through that process. They were already plastered a cheater by basically the fan base. So the UFC changes it now to where they don't announce it, and now it just leads to this, where it's all this wild speculation, accusations. I don't know what the right answer is. I don't know what, because I mean, it seems like either way you're going to have some negative to the process, right? Yes. So I don't know how the process can be tweaked to avoid this sort of thing. And it is unfortunate. And I agree with you. Just even if that is the situation that's going on and we don't know it, but if the UFC told Yoel Romero that, I mean, that's very poor form, like you said.
Yeah, unprofessional. I think I'm always of the belief, and from the beginning when they started the program, I thought it was actually a good thing to announce a potential violation. The problem was I don't think they went far enough. They weren't transparent enough.
I was going to say there wasn't enough transparency. It was too vague on a lot of it.
Too vague. It was too vague. So you throw that out there, oh, it's a potential violation, and then it leads people to, again, speculate and jump to conclusions because you don't know what it is. They didn't say what the substance is, so everyone is like, oh, steroids, when it may not have been steroids. It may have been something completely, I wouldn't say harmless, but something that's not nearly as sinister as a steroid. What they should have done from the jump with this program is they should have announced the violation. And this is the UFC again announcing the violation, right? Not USADA. It's the UFC's policy. They announced the violations, or the potential violations, I should say. What they should have done is they should have announced the potential violation, and also at the same time got with the fighter and had the fighter give a statement along with that. So at least the fighter had his or her statement, his or her side of the story along with it. So it's not just a one-sided thing like, oh, this person popped, this person failed the drug test. Get with the fighter, develop a statement, give his or her side of the story, and put that all out together at the same time. That way, it's not damning, and people don't jump to conclusions right away. That's what, in a perfect world, that's what I would have done. But I mean, you could also make the case that why are you giving if this person did fail a drug test, why are you giving them that form to possibly lie? So it is a Pandora's box. It's not, there's no easy answer.
Well, let's talk really briefly about the fight itself before we move on. Yeah. Because to me, this one doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I understood it when it was Yoel Romero versus Paulo Costa. You're trying to test Paulo Costa. You have faith in him at that point that he is one of the guys at middleweight. And that's sort of a win over Yoel Romero is basically the biggest win you can get at middleweight other than a title fight. At this point, I would say a win over Yoel Romero is even bigger than a win over even like a big name like an Anderson Silva or something like that. Just with the level of respect that he commands from generally the MMA consuming audience. Jacare though, but Jacare versus Romero too, running this back. This feels to me like we're just biding time, like we're just stalling. I understood Jacare at this point. He wanted a title shot. He wasn't going to get a title shot, but he wanted some kind of contendership fight. He certainly got it, and he gets a chance to I mean, I guess he gets a chance to fight Yoel Romero again, which I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. But to me, at this point, if you're Yoel Romero and it's not Paulo Costa or one of these different type of interesting matchups, and you're just doing a retread, like why not just go to 205 at that point? We have seen it over and over again. Thiago Santos, Anthony Smith, all of these guys, there are so much opportunity at 205. Volkan Ozdemir, it takes 2 or 3 wins. And if you're Yoel Romero, it maybe takes one win, one good win to get to a Jon Jones level of a fight at 205. Why not do that with the remaining time you have in your career? I mean, he's a man who's 40 years old at this point. Instead of just doing a retread like the Jacare. I mean, do you share I don't know if I'm sour on this fight, but I'm definitely not as excited for it as I would have expected for Yoel Romero's return.
I mean, in a vacuum, it's still a very good fight, 100%, of course, but it does feel like just a fight, just kind of a standby in the division as things take shape. Because if Jacare wins, let's say, are people really going to be clamoring him to fight Whitaker or Gastelum? I mean, maybe Adesanya. But the winner of that fight is not going to get anything until after Whitaker comes back and fights the winner of Gastelum versus Adesanya. So it really is just kind of a placeholder fight. They needed a main event. Romero he lives in South Florida, has for a long time, and he's going to headline that event. So they found someone to headline with them, and Jacare was available. And it's a meaningful fight in that both of them are top contenders at middleweight, but it's just kind of there. The winner obviously does gain a little bit of ground, but it's not. Romero Costa made a little bit more sense because there's a chance Romero kind of plays the gatekeeper, and then if Costa beats Romero, then you go like, wow, okay, this guy Boachinia is the real deal. Whereas we already know Jacare is the real deal, whether he beats Romero or not, and we've already seen him lose to Whitaker and Gastelum. So it's tough, and then there's the underlying thing where Romero has missed weight in his last 2 fights. He can't make, I think he can make 186, and I think he'll make weight to fight Jacare. But can he make 185? 1 pound more? He couldn't do that in Chicago last year against Whitaker. So are we putting him in a position again to fight for another title at 185? I don't know, man. I'm like you. I want to see him at 205. I think that he would be a destroyer at 205.
Yeah. Well, and I will throw in one last thing before we move on. I understand that complications came up with the arena and it was difficult to get the arena in Miami, but goddamn, we missed an opportunity to have Yoel Romero fighting in Miami, and I think that would have been something really cool. Just like in terms of a scene, a spectacle. He has such a fan base down there and the Cuban following down there. I mean, that would have been a wild scene if we could have gotten that fight in Miami like it was supposed to.
It would have been really cool. And yeah, it's Miami. I mean, it's Miami. Maybe even Conor McGregor will show up. He's down there.
He is down there, and we'll get to that. Next up, coming from the MMA fighting page, is our good friend Dizzy Dorf, who's asking about the rest of UFC London. We already talked about the main event, so we will avoid that. But what are your predictions for the main card this weekend, he asks, and what fight are you most looking forward to? So, Marc, we already talked about the main event, like I said. Let's each pick one fight on this card, because it is a sneaky good card that we have our eyes on. And for me, it is the light heavyweight affair on the main card between Volkan Ozdemir and Dominic Reyes. Dominic Reyes is someone who, I mean, we have talked ad nauseum about how this light heavyweight division has developed into a really actually kind of interesting division with all of these young up-and-comers who are sort of storming the ranks, storming the castle at this point. And Dominic Reyes is another one of those guys. I mean, he is now 4-0 in the UFC, 3 submissions. He just beat OSP on his last time out, and really, it was an impressive performance. I mean, it was crazy that he didn't get the finish in that fight. Volkan Ozdemir has sort of turned into this gatekeeper role, and I feel like it suits him at the current moment with where he is sort of in this division. I love everything about this fight. I'm going to have my eye squarely on this one. Oh,
yeah, I love that fight 100% because it does kind of give if you're following the story of the light heavyweight division, it is a fascinating fight. Two younger guys, you know, in a division that could really use a boost in terms of young blood. I'll have to say that the co-main event though, Leon Edwards versus Gunnar Nelson, that is a sneaky important fight for the welterweight division. How many wins do you think Leon Edwards has in a row, off the top of your head?
Oh man, it's a lot. Maybe 7, 6.
He has 6, so it'll be 7 if he beats Gunnar Nelson. And he's not a guy that we talk about very often as a guy who could get a title shot at welterweight, but 7 in a row. I mean, how do you kind of ignore that? Granted, I mean, I think most of these fights have been overseas. They haven't been in the States. He has not fought in the States since 2015, which is crazy. That's actually his last loss to Kamaru Usman, interestingly enough.
But I mean, when you look at the resume of what he's been rattling off, the names he's been rattling off on this run, it's pretty damn impressive, man. You got Cowboy in there, Brian Barberena, Vicente Luque, Albert Tumanov. Like, none of those fights are easy.
Yeah, 100%. And then you have Gunnar Nelson, who, you know, again, with the win, he'll have 1 4 or 5. He beat Alex Cowboy, who we know is a very hard out, and he finished him last time out. His only loss recently was to Santiago Ponzinibbio, and that's the fight where he got poked in the eye. So, I mean, that's a really important fight at welterweight, and I think that it's a really fascinating style matchup because Edwards is a very good striker, and of course, we know that Gunnar Nelson is just a fantastic grappler who has shown some ability on the feet as well. So it's fascinating. I really like this one a lot.
Shown some ability on the feet and also shown some dance moves.
Yeah, man. How about that? Every year, Mjolnir around this time of year puts out like a funny parody music video. I love it. It's great. Those wacky Vikings.
And like you said, last thing on this, I mean, it is a really fascinating style matchup to me because Leon Edwards is one of the, I would say, most underrated wrestlers in this division. He is a very stifling wrestler. And you know Gunnar Nelson, I mean, his grappling is tremendous, and off of his back, he is no joke. So that should, just the way those two styles play into each other, should be very interesting to watch.
Yeah, looking forward to that one. So let's move on now, back to the MMA fighting comments. From Duncan Hills. And we did kind of, we can go over this briefly because we talked about Yoel already at 205, but Duncan Hills writing, Yoel at 205, greetings from Taipei, boys.
What's up, Taipei?
What's up, Taipei?
What's up, Taipei?
I heard the food in Taipei is just out of control. So good. Anyway, I was glad to hear Marundi say he'd like Yoel to move up to 205 a couple of weeks ago. I agree, since he missed weight in his last 2 fights. Who would you like to see him face if he were to go up? I genuinely think his wrestling would give Jones flamingo legs, some trouble. Keep up the good work. Who would you want to see Yoel Romero fight at 205?
Jon Jones. I really would love to see that. I mean, we've talked about that fight a lot, but that would be the body contrast, the style contrast, everything about that, the personality contrast. That would be fascinating on a lot of levels.
You think they fight each other?
I know they're boys and they have they share the same management, but I mean, it's a title, right? Like it's a championship.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I guess so. I guess so. I'd love to see Yoel Romero fight Thiago Santos. That would be chaos. That would be freaking chaos. I'd love that. All right. Should we move on from there?
Yeah. I think we already kind of covered that.
Yeah. All right. From Lodovic, our pal, UFC titles. Hi guys. We all know there's way too many champs and interim titles. Do you think this trend will continue, or it will somehow be fixed in the foreseeable future and we'll get back to the more conservative matchmaking? Also, do you think that there is any chance the UFC does what boxing organizations were doing all these years and will introduce a lesser version of their title, something like an international/intercontinental champion?
I do not think that the latter will ever happen. That seems very against sort of Dana White's ethos about how he believes these titles should be handed out and what they should mean. Although as for the former and the question whether is this going to get better, I mean, we've talked about this, but I don't think it's going to get better. I think it's probably going to get worse. I think this year we're going to have more interim titles than we've ever had introduced. We've already had several, and there are more on the way. I'm sure we're going to get a featherweight one, and who knows whether a heavyweight one's coming. It feels like this. We had talked about this actually 2 weeks ago when we were in Las Vegas, where it's just where's the bottom, right? Like how deep can this go before it actually negatively affects business in a tangible way? And I think that would be the only way that the UFC would actually reverse course on this, is if they see a tangible difference in fan interest, fan enthusiasm, whether these titles actually seem to matter at all anymore. And I don't know that that's going to happen. We're just a bunch of crazy people who love watching these fights and are going to watch these fights anyway, and they know that, and they take advantage of that.
What's interesting is that the last pay-per-view, Jon Jones versus Anthony Smith, ended up doing far better than I thought it would on pay-per-view. It did about, I think Dave Meltzer estimated somewhere in that 600,000 to low 700,000 range, which is very good, very, very good for the time period that we're in right now. And that was a dominant champion against a contender, a lesser known contender coming up and challenging for the title. It wasn't a super fight. It wasn't champ versus champ. It wasn't anything like that. It was just the long-term champion against a guy trying to rise and defeat the long-term champion. Now, granted, Jon Jones is a big star, and I think that we're seeing that more now, that he's probably a bigger star now than he's ever been before, because Anthony Smith, who, by the way, I mean, just a fantastic guy. I mean, just a class act that entire week. Spoke to him yesterday. Just a good dude, but not a known guy on that level as a B-side to Jon Jones, and still popped a really good number. Also, there might have been other considerations. The other title fight, Willie Usman, Ben Askren talking a bunch of crap, but you got to give credit to Jon Jones and where his stardom is that did so well. And again, that was just a regular champ versus contender. There's nothing wrong with that. That it was a good formula for a long time with the UFC. I'm not sure why they got away from it. So I mean,
you know why they got away from it. It's the schedule. It's just too much.
Yeah, but to me, that's actually in opposition to the schedule, because if you need title fights and you're putting your champions in the same fight, then you lose out on one of those champions fighting again later in the year on another pay-per-view. It seems like it's been there are times where it makes sense and there are times where it does not make sense. And they used to only do it when it really, really, really made sense and it was a no-brainer. They tried at least. And now it's like they do it for every champion. It doesn't matter if you defend the belt, they just go right to it.
I think it just became such an overwhelmingly successful formula that they felt the need to revisit the well, because like they need, I don't know, the way that it sort of works out, right? Like they'd rather go for one big show and then like 2 or 3 small shows and then get that one big number again than just keep hitting like these middling numbers for every show like it would be if you didn't do it. Like I understand
numbers though. I mean, DC versus Miocic didn't do great numbers at all, and that was heavyweight title, champ versus champ. I mean,
yep. You're right. Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what the strategy is there. As far as what Lodovic is asking, is this Lodovic? Did I screw that up?
No, it's not. Oh yeah, it is Lodovic. It is
Lodovic. As far as what he's asking about, like international, intercontinental champions, I mean, you might as well, right? You might as well call it that instead of an interim champion. If you look at Max Holloway's post from yesterday on Instagram, I don't know if you noticed this, Shaun. I don't know if you saw it. But he says he's fighting, quote, for the UFC 155 IC title. He's fighting for the Intercontinental belt, Shaun. The one that Shawn Michaels used to wear around his waist. The IC title. The white title. HBK.
Doesn't IC also just stand for interim championship?
Wouldn't championship and title be redundant? He's fighting for the Intercontinental title, my friend.
I mean, ATM machine is redundant, but people say ATM machine.
I don't say it. Who says ATM machine?
Really? I've heard people say that my entire life.
Say ATM machine because Arizona.
You watch your tongue. You watch your tongue.
All right, let's move on. What do we got? I got Max Holloway's on Instagram up on my computer right now. From M. Haydock, illegal knees in title fights. Hi, Shaun and Marc. Quick questions. What do you think would have happened if Anthony Smith landed the same illegal knee on Jon Jones at the same point in the fight? Kamaru Usman landed an illegal knee on Woodley in the 4th round. Do you think both champions would have taken the Anthony Smith route? I'm just gonna say right off the bat, I have no idea. I have no clue. I mean, how could you possibly know that?
Oh, where's the fun in that? Come on.
How could you possibly know that? I mean, that's just an impossible question to ask. Every situation is different. I mean, what am I gonna say that Jon Jones would have bailed out of that fight? I mean, I have no clue. I have no clue what would have went down. It's completely. I mean, too many variables.
Sure, fine. I will give an answer.
Give an answer.
I don't think either of them would have taken the easy way out. I mean, Tyron Woodley and Jon Jones have been in our life long enough to know that they may be a lot of things, but they're both hyper competitive men, and I don't think either one of them would have been okay winning in that fashion.
The thing about it, and what is crazy to me about the Anthony Smith situation is that he did, I guess, what most people would say is the right thing, right? He didn't take the disqualification. He let the fight go on, even though he was wronged in that fight. I mean, it was a foul. It was a hard knee to the head, and so much so that Herb Dean ruled it intentional and took 2 points away from Jon Jones. So he did the right thing, but it's still a hard one. I mean, look, I'm not saying he should have done anything differently. I think that he did the right thing because he would have been freaking crucified by fans if he did not. But he also would have made more money, and he would have been the light heavyweight title, the light heavyweight champion. So it's kind of a tough one that in this sport sometimes, even though you're wronged, you have to kind of suck it up and do the quote-unquote right thing for the fans and the sport. It's unfortunate because, I mean,
I don't know.
It's not his fault, you know?
I don't know that he did the right thing for the fans. Like, I don't know in the moment.
I'm not saying
in the moment that's not what he was thinking. I think it's more of just a pride thing, right? Where it's just he got this far on his own merit. He wouldn't feel okay winning in that fashion.
Of course. But look, I mean, it's a hard knee to the head in the 4th round against Jon Jones, an illegal knee. Should you have to continue after that? I mean, but there's this mentality in the sport where, yeah, you kind of have to. You kind of have to do it, otherwise there's going to be backlash against you. And maybe that's just how fighters are, right? They're gonna press through no matter what, even if. And again, I don't think that he should have not continued, but there is a pressure to continue, whether or not you feel like you should or not.
Oh, absolutely. And I'll tell you what, if I'm fighting Jon Jones, I am poking him in the eye once. I am hitting him in the balls once. I am holding the cage once. I'm doing everything at least once, and I'm doing it early. I'm trying to set a tone of that. So it doesn't matter. It really just doesn't matter.
You're just going to be a dirty fighter against Jon Jones.
Hey, man, they allow it. You get one of everything, right? So might as well use them. Otherwise, you're just leaving it on the table.
Any more thoughts on that?
No, I think we can move on. We got a lot left.
We got
Next one, I'll do the next one. It's coming from the same gentleman, Mr. M. Haydock 06. And he writes about Darren Till early title shot. Hi, Shaun and Marc. Do you think Darren Till got a title shot too early in his UFC career? It was clear that Colby Covington was a contender at that time, but Darren Till benefited from a gap in the schedule. Whilst the shot has the shot has definitely increased his earnings and profile, do you think this will act as a hindrance in his career or a positive? Whilst he now has the experience of being in there with the best at that time, his only other top 15 opponents were Cerrone and Wonderboy. Would it have been better for him to take some more fights and gradually test out his wrestling so that he could go for the titles on his own terms? Or do you think you should jump at a title shot when you get it? Thanks. And to me, that's a very simple answer to that question, right? It's just at this point, title shots are so erratic. You don't ever know when they're coming. Ask Tony Ferguson, ask Dustin Poirier. This stuff just changes on a dime, on a moment's notice. Ask Colby Covington. When they come with you with that offer, you kind of have to take it at this point. If you're able to fight, if you're Darren Till who is sitting there ready and able to fight, you have to accept that fight.
Yeah, there's no such thing right now in the UFC as, you know what, guys, I'm going to turn down this title fight and maybe I'll get one later on. If you do that, you're probably never going to get another title shot. You're never going to, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if they need you on that date and you turn it down. And Till had won, I think he hadn't lost in 6 fights. He had beaten Wonderboy and Donald Cerrone. So you can't really say that he wasn't deserving of a title shot. There was someone more deserving in Colby Covington, but Till was right there. I mean, I don't think anyone was really all that upset about who it was if Covington wasn't getting the shot. So, I mean, I don't think that, I mean, he's got to take that fight. What I mean, it just, again, you can't say no to that situation. Plus, it's a lot more money. And then if you win, you're champion. I don't think in today's UFC, there's no such thing as, sorry guys, you know, I'm gonna wait for the next opportunity. I'm gonna try to get some more fights under my belt, which could come up in like Johnny Walker, someone like that, for instance, who has actually said like, no, I don't want to fight for the title yet. I want to get some more wins and more cage time under my belt. Guess what? If that opportunity comes and he's over the fight against Jon Jones later this year in his next fight, he's gonna have to take it, and he probably will take it.
And I don't even know that that's a new phenomenon, man. That's kind of just how this sport has been built in the foundation of it, right? Because especially now. I agree with that. But even if you just go down the line, you go back to a bunch of examples. Kyoji Horiguchi was very young in his run when he got his title shot. Literally like a month before he got his shot, he said, I do not want the shot. I don't think I'm ready for it. And then he ends up just taking it because at that point, you've gotten this far on your own confidence, right? Like you just have to bet on yourself, and you believe that you can make something magical happen that night and just change your life forever.
Derek Lewis said after UFC 229, I don't want a title shot. I'm not ready for it yet. I don't deserve it. And then 4 weeks later, he was fighting Daniel Cormier in the headliner at Madison Square Garden for the title. So.
You got to take the money. You got to take the opportunity because you just don't know when it will come next. And also, if you don't take it, it's likely that your next fight's probably going to be a difficult stylistic matchup for you.
Yeah,
there's a little bit of vindictiveness in there.
It's a volatile sport. You can get injured. You know, you can never be the same. I mean, you got to take it when it comes.
It's a volatile sport, and it is also a vindictive sport. And
yes,
matchmakers will make you pay if you don't do what they like.
Yeah. All right, let's move on from Zaku Kogeki. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly. My apologies if not. Logjam in the divisions. If you guys ran the UFC, how would you guys solve the logjam problem each division is facing? Thanks for all the content you guys provide. I'm just going to give a very simple answer here, and it's not realistic. It's not realistic, and it's not going to happen. But the thing that I would do if I was UFC God is I would make less fight cards. That's very simple. It's very simple. Make less fight cards, and then a lot of those problems.
How are you solving a divisional logjam then?
Because if you have less fight cards, you will actually get the contenders who should be fighting for the belt more times than not, instead of trying to. What? How? You're giving me a look.
Yeah. How? If you have less fights, how does that make you? How does that equal more fights? That makes sense.
Because you don't have to fill those holes every month on pay-per-view. So, okay. So for instance, last fall, Tyron Woodley was ready to fight at UFC 228 in September, right? Colby Covington was not ready to fight. That should have been the fight. He was the interim champion. That should have been the fight. So instead of saying, you know what, I'm sorry, Colby, we're gonna go with someone else because we have to fill that spot in the card, you say, okay, Colby, when are you gonna be ready? Okay, November. Okay, we'll put that fight as the co-main event or the main event of the Madison Square Garden show. So Colby gets that fight. So there's no logjam at the top because the contender is actually fighting the champion the way that it should be, and then you move on from there. That's what I'm saying.
In your hypothetical world, then you basically though have to cut 200 UFC fighters. You just have to slash like a third of the roster at that point if you have less fight cards.
That's fine.
That's fine.
Yeah, I mean that'll be great for some of the smaller promotions. You know, they can have and it could be. I mean, in the short term, it's bad for fighters financially, I guess. But you go to a small promotion, you build your name up there, and you build a higher profile. And you come in the UFC, and you're at a higher point than you were when you left.
In that point, though, these divisions are 15 to 20 people deep, and you're not looking at sort of a well of prospects coming up.
I'm not saying go from 40 fight cards to like 15. I'm saying go from like 40 to 30 or 35.
That's significant, though.
It is significant. It is significant. And I mean, there are fighters in the UFC right now who don't get enough fights, enough as they want, even though they do have all these spots on the calendar. It's tough. It's tough. I mean, it's not an easy answer, but you're asking me how, you know, whatever this dude's name is, Zaku is asking me how do you solve the logjam? And the easy answer is, well, don't do so many super fights. Don't do so many champ versus champ fights because it takes guys away from divisions, and make less cards so you're not having to fill or don't feel the need to have a title fight headline every pay-per-view. Find other options instead of having to force a title fight in the main event and maybe the co-main event of every show.
My answer to this question would be it's a two-prong attack, right? One, if I'm at this point, I'm the MMA czar, I'm the sports czar, I can just make whatever I want, wave magic wand, and it happens. 165. 155, 165, 175. Split those two divisions up because those two divisions are the two that are most commonly log jammed. Split those two divisions up into three, get them going, get some interesting fights with all three in the title fights. Boom, those are fixed. And then what else is really log jam, right? You have featherweight. I guess at that point you have to do an interim title, right? Frankie Edgar versus somebody for an interim title. Heavyweight. I just go DC versus Francis Ngannou. I'm sick of waiting for Brock Lesnar. Get these things moving. That would be it. Just practical matchmaking. Just get these guys moving again.
Bantamweight is also kind of jacked up right now. If Cejudo gets the shot, Moraes has been waiting for a while.
This is more of what I'm saying. Go Dillashaw versus Moraes, Cejudo versus Benavidez. Just keep these things moving. Keep these things moving. We cannot keep waiting for these champ versus champ fights.
Yeah. And I think I mean, they probably figure that Dillashaw versus Moraes is not a big enough fight for a pay-per-view main or co-main event. I mean, although I don't necessarily know if I disagree. I agree with that.
But hold on, though, because is Dillashaw versus Cejudo 2 any sort of tangible difference if that's your main event?
Like, I think they feel that way because it's a champ versus champ.
But I don't know that sells more than 50,000 more pay-per-views than Dillashaw versus.
Yeah, I'm not saying I agree, but I think that's what they think.
It's just frustrating.
It can be. It can be.
Hey, well, let's keep things moving. Next question's coming from Iceman 25, who wants to know about Ariel Helwani versus presidential candidate Andrew Yang. This is an interesting one. What are your thoughts on the small exchange between Ariel Helwani, our good buddy, and presidential candidate Andrew Yang, and how Andrew is suggesting that it may be tougher for journalists like Ariel, who are part of ESPN, to critique the UFC? Also, what are your thoughts on what Andrew is suggesting, applying the Muhammad Ali Act to MMA? Love the show. Always looking forward to Wednesdays. Thank you for that. And so that's an interesting question. He is, of course, talking about a Twitter exchange that our good friend Ariel and Andrew had, I think earlier in this week, maybe a couple days ago, where Andrew effectively said, I don't think Ariel can talk about these issues in regards to unionization, and then Ariel kind of snapped back at him. What was your takeaway from everything?
I think it's obvious that Andrew Yang is not really following MMA that closely, because who has talked more about this stuff than Ariel Helwani over the years? Yeah. I mean, he has been, I mean, I wouldn't say he's like Mr. Union, where he's like on board with the UFC getting union, but he's put these issues into the light in a higher profile and more, I would say, volume wise than almost anyone else. And I believe he tweeted about a possible union or collective bargaining in December when the UFC moved the entire UFC 232 card from Las Vegas to Los Angeles. So that was pretty recently. He was at ESPN at the time. So I mean, I don't think that Yang really has his facts straight here. I think that maybe there is that perception that because the UFC is on ESPN, that Ariel wouldn't be able to criticize them. But Ariel hammered the UFC for the Greg Hardy stuff on ESPN programming. So I think a little bit of Yang's point is bankrupt. I think it's a very surface level critique in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it, right? Because Ariel has consistently been very I would say he's been consistent with not being afraid to criticize the UFC in any of its decisions in any regard. And just historically, I mean, how much does the UFC hate him at this point? How much does Dana White hate him? There's a reason for it. So I understand where Andrew was coming from. I think his sentiment was misplaced, but I do appreciate his passion for MMA and his interest in it. It is very uncommon that we get someone who, I don't know that he is a very likely presidential candidate. I don't know that he is very well known, but it is interesting to just have someone of that stature and someone going for that office talking about our sport at all.
Well, I mean, the president of the United States is a UFC fan, promoted MMA shows back in the day, so it's not all that crazy in this weird world that we're living in now. Granted, he's coming from a different side. I think Yang is coming from a labor side, whereas the other guy is coming from a billionaire side. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. Let's move on before I say something that I'm going to get in trouble for.
The other guy.
From Sheila. I am Sheila Andrea. Is Frankie fighting soon? I imagine that she's talking about Frankie Edgar, not Frankie Perez. Hi, Marc and Shaun. I hope you are happy today, Marc. I'm all right. And I hope you are feeling so much better, Shaun. By the way, I love the great vibe that you give, so please don't mind Marc too much. He. Cool. Ali Abdelaziz something about Frankie Edgar, which seemed to me like Frankie might be fighting soon. I hope that's the case. Now that Aldo versus Volkanovski is official for UFC 237, and if Frankie is indeed fighting soon, who do you think his opponent will be? And do you think this will be for an interim belt? I know you discussed this last week, but with the new updates, I'm curious to hear your thoughts about it now. I really enjoy the show, and thank you for always pushing through, even when you guys are sometimes under the weather. Well, thank you, Sheila. Shaun, what do you think? Frankie Edgar, what's next for him? Is he fighting soon?
That was such a nice question. I love anytime you guys want to get on our good side, just load your question with compliments. That's it. That's all we need.
That may work for you. I don't know if it works for me.
Just feed our egos. That's all.
I see through that.
I'm going to say it again. I said it last week, but I think Frankie Edgar ends up getting an interim title fight in his next fight. And I know we're against interim titles in general as a show, but this one's kind of warranted given what they're doing with Max Holloway.
So it has to be against Ortega then.
Yeah, it kind of has to be, right? Because Jose Aldo and Volkanovski are doing what they're doing. Unless you want to throw Zabit in there, and they're teammates, so I don't think they would fight. Otherwise, you're going down the list to a Cub Swanson again, or a Mirsad Bektik, maybe a Yair Rodriguez. Like, there aren't a lot of great options other than a Brian Ortega.
Frankie already dispatched Yair Rodriguez pretty effortlessly.
Yeah. I don't know that there's a lot of options there.
There's not. It has to be Ortega, but Ortega knocked Edgar out. I mean, you could do it. I mean,
Volkanovski would have been.
I think we're what's that?
Volkanovski would have been the one. That would have been the one that
was actually the fight.
That was the one that made the most sense.
Yeah, but they needed someone for Aldo and Rio. Again, they had a spot to fill, and they filled it, and it messed up the trajectory.
But Brian Ortega, that fight was right there. Jose Aldo, Brian Ortega. That was the one that made the most sense to me. You could have just mixed and matched these two up, and it would have made, I don't know. It would have just made more sense, I guess.
It would have made more sense. It would have made more sense. And I think Ortega was calling for that, right? But I don't know. I don't know the timing, the situation, if he wanted to go to Brazil for that fight. I don't know.
Are you interested in a rematch between Ortega and Edgar? Does that get you going at all?
I mean, yeah, I'm interested in. I love to watch both of those guys,
It
and
seems like you're not that interested and you're trying to talk yourself into it.
no, not true. This is the first time I've really thought about it. I'm not really interested in it for an interim title, because I mean Ortega wins the interim title and then he fights like Holloway, and we just saw that, and it was fairly one sided. But as a fight, yeah, I mean I think that I am fascinated by both guys, not just in the cage but outside the cage. I think they're both really. I mean, it's like two of like the coolest, nicest guys in MMA fighting each other in Ortega and Frankie Edgar. Yeah, I mean, I'm interested in a vacuum, but not as far as what could come next. Not for like an interim title.
Yeah. Just to briefly hit the follow-up question to that from M. Haydock, which also got greened, so we'll hit it.
Not getting greedy.
I know,
man.
You guys are generous with your recs for M. Haydock.
We got to start rationing.
He asks, where are Yair Rodriguez and Korean Zombie after their war? Neither has a fight lined up. I think you answered your own question, man. I mean, that was such a brutal war for both of those guys. They have taken a long and much needed break since Korean Zombie actually has been training here in Arizona at the MMA lab relatively recently. So it's been a while now. I would expect both those guys to get a fight booked on the schedule within the next month or two, to be honest.
Yeah, I imagine they'll both be fighting like around summer or so.
Yeah. All right, man. Let's move on. Next one's coming from Farah Puera on the MMA Fighting page, who wants to know about Mr. Conor McGregor. In the last 3 years, Conor has been arrested more times than he has fought in MMA. His sparring videos look lousy. Skills-wise, he is an average 0.5 lightweight at best.
I don't know what that means.
I don't know what that means.
No idea.
Beyond Diaz 3, what else is there for Conor? I highly doubt he has the ability to beat Khabib, nor Tony, nor this new version of Max Holloway. So another belt is wishful thinking. So a lot of haterade in that question, Mark. Let's use it to first as a broad,
some bias there,
as a broad scope to look at sort of what happened with Conor McGregor this week. Big deal or no deal? His arrest for basically smashing a fan's cell phone.
I would say in a vacuum, it's really not that big of a deal. So just to give a little bit of a refresher. So Monday in the early morning hours, like after 5 a.m. on Monday morning. So Sunday, I guess, would you say Sunday night into Monday, McGregor was leaving the Fontainebleau, very famous hotel in Miami Beach, and a person, a man, a fan, I don't know what you want to call this person, allegedly came over to him to take a picture, and McGregor allegedly slapped the phone down out of his hand and stomped on it, and then picked it up and walked away with it. And he's being charged with 2 felony counts in Miami, which seems like a lot for that. 2 felony counts: strong arm robbery and criminal mischief. Those are the 2 charges he's facing. He will be arraigned. He's out on $12,500 bail bond, and he is due back in court April 10th. Doesn't have to go himself. He has to just write a written plea if he doesn't show up himself. But that is pretty much the story. And I saw that the man, the alleged victim in this case, spoke to TMZ Sports, which is interesting. So it's just, I mean, I don't know if this is a big deal in a vacuum, Shaun. I mean, it's, I see it from both ways. Obviously, you shouldn't be doing that. It is against the law. You shouldn't be smashing the possessions of other people. On the other hand, I kind of get, this is a guy that wherever he goes at this point, he gets a camera phone stuck in his face in some way or another. So I kind of get that. It was probably a long night. It was late. I'm sure he was at the club. There's a very famous nightclub in that hotel. And probably just, he said, what was his Instagram post? Something about trying to build patience. And he just lost his cool, which again, he shouldn't do. But in a vacuum, it's not that big of a deal, I guess. However, I would say that if you look at the full picture of what's been going on with Conor McGregor over the last few years, the bus incident, the post UFC 229 stuff, which again was not completely his fault. He had a role in it, of course. There is kind of a pattern forming of behavior in a way, and it's something to kind of take a look at and see, well, what is going on with this guy? So I think is of greater concern. If this just happened, it was like the first thing that he's done, that he got arrested for, then you could say like, all right, it's, you know, he lost his cool. But there is kind of a bigger story at play here, I believe.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of, you hit the nail on the head there, right? Because I would say this is no deal in a vacuum. This is a very minor incident. Obviously, he shouldn't be doing this, but I think everybody can relate to it on some level and kind of understand just that sentiment of how frustrating it must be to always have a camera in your face, whether you want it or not. That being said, though, I think the pattern, like you said, that when I joked at the top in the show, I said his annual arrest, he got out of the way early. That's kind of the problem, right? Though, is that this has become an annual occurrence for him. Where how many troubles, run-ins with the law has he had? Whether it's just minor things like speeding or parking tickets, or now it's getting to this, the bus incident. It becomes tiresome to have this be the conversation with Conor McGregor. Where how did he mess up next?
Mm-hmm.
How did something else go wrong? I miss the old conversation with Conor McGregor. It was just how interesting he was as a person, as a fighter, as an athlete, as a figure in the sport. I wish we could somehow get back to that, but it doesn't feel like we are going to be able to ever get back to that. If I'm being honest,
it's so, this sport, it's like it's just, when you reach the highest level of the UFC, it's almost like it chews you up and spits you out in a relatively short time. I mean, it was like with McGregor, and he can still get back there, but it's not what it was. And Ronda Rousey, kind of on not quite the same thing, but also kind of both of them flew a little bit too close to the sun, and now they're nowhere near where they used to be in the eyes of fans and their popularity and celebrity. McGregor's celebrity is still obviously extremely high, but as far as the sport goes, this is as low as he's been in quite some time, going back to probably before he ever won a belt, right? I mean, this is kind of like, we just don't know where he's at. And even like someone like Jon Jones, I mean, the guy reached the pinnacle of the sport and then had all these, you know, all these outside the cage slip ups. It's almost like if you reach the highest level of the UFC, and some guys, not really. I mean, George St. Pierre actually had to give up his title because he said he was like, losing his mind. He gave up his welterweight title because there was too much pressure on him, and he went away for 4 years. So that's everyone kind of deals with it differently, but it seems like there is just an immense amount of pressure on you when you reach that high level of the UFC.
I mean, if we're being honest, that's sort of a symptom of the fight game itself, right? Just because historically, even you look at boxers, Mike Tyson or whoever, once you reach a certain level of wealth and a certain level of fame, it is much more of a difficult road to manage the sport, just because why are you doing it at that point, right? But I think with the UFC, that is even compounded even further, because I don't know that this is a sport designed for rich people to function well in it, if that makes any sense. Because
these are fighters. These are people who fight for a living, and now all of a sudden they're multimillionaires.
But not even that, but UFC in particular, MMA as a whole, but the UFC in particular, everything is dictated to you. You don't really have any autonomy over your career. You don't really have any freedom over what you want to do next. It's always, hey, you're going to fight here. You're going to fight this guy. Hey, you lost your title. You're going to go back down and you're going to try to fight. You're going to have to fight Cowboy on a co-main event, that sort of thing. And I think once you've reached a point like a Conor McGregor or a Ronda Rousey, where you're so obscenely wealthy, Jon Jones, whoever, and you're just so obscenely rich and famous and wealthy, it is difficult to put yourself back in that place where it's just like, oh, you're telling me that I'm not the main event? I am the main event, that sort of thing. And I don't know if that makes sense, but it doesn't feel like, to me, this is a sport designed for immensely wealthy people to succeed at it, which makes what George St. Pierre did even more impressive in my eyes, because he navigated that perfectly.
Right. And GSP was long-term champion and also a huge draw, especially in his home country. But they're much nicer in Canada than they are here, so that could play a part in it as well. Yeah.
Also, really quickly before we move on, because we didn't get a chance to talk about this last week, the reports coming out about Conor McGregor Cowboy Cerrone not happening because that fight because UFC not wanting to put that in the main event. Are you on my side with this, where that seems ridiculously absurd that they wouldn't like why is that even a discussion? That, of course, they're the main event.
That can't be real.
Conor McGregor is the most famous fighter in the history of the sport. He's the biggest pay-per-view draw in the history of the sport. We have done countless non-title fights in headliners of pay-per-views. If you put any title fight in the UFC on that card, and then you put Conor McGregor versus Donald Cerrone, what do you think people are actually going to watch that card for? It's for the main event. It's ridiculous that if that is even an actual discussion.
I don't believe that's real. I don't think that's real.
How could it be? How UFC understands the numbers. The UFC understands the metrics.
It can't be real. It can't be real. It can't be real. I don't believe. I saw Joe Rogan say it. I saw Cowboy Cerrone say it. That might be what the UFC is telling them, but I don't think that's real. I can't be. It just can't be. It makes no sense. How can you put Conor McGregor as the co-main event of anything? That's absurd. I don't think it's real. I think there's other reasons why that fight might not go down, and the UFC may just be saying that. But it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
All right, thank you. I just needed to make sure you were on the same side.
Of course. I mean, look, in his last fight, he set the record for the highest pay-per-view buys in company history. I think he has like 3 of the top 4, right?
Yeah.
4 of the top 5.
Yeah, I think it's 4 of the top 5.
Top 5. And Cowboy Cerrone is actually a better B-side than some of the aforementioned fighters. I don't know, man.
Well, hey, let's keep things moving. We have probably like 35 minutes left, and we're going to try to get through as much as possible because you do have a hard out. Next up's coming from the MMA fighting page, Unstable Puppet, who this is a little bit of inside baseball one. This is interesting. But what happened to Kid Nate? I know Kid Nate works for Bloody Elbow. He's talking about Nate Wilcox, of course. But Bloody Elbow is part of the Vox and SBN family. I noticed that he disappeared from Bloody Elbow recently, but I do not recall an announcement made by either Bloody Elbow or himself. I wonder if you guys have heard anything that you'd be able to share about his departure, or is this a personal kind of thing? Inquiring minds got to know. Gorf, gorf. I don't know if I'm missing something there at the end.
God bless you.
Yeah, this is a pretty simple answer, though. I mean, Kid Nate is still with us. He's still with Bloody Elbow.
He hasn't gone anywhere. What are you talking about? He didn't disappear. I was on a Slack channel with him an hour ago. Like, what are you talking about? He's around. He has not gone anywhere.
Yeah, that's it. That's well said.
Yeah, it's very strange. Very strange question. Moving on from to Harry Byrne. Okay. What are the odds?
I don't know why that made me giggle.
What are the odds? Ready? This is a little bit of a list type of question. Ready?
Oh, I like this. Odds makers. We need more of this type of. All right, go for it.
We know how good I am with odds. That's a joke. I'm not good with odds, obviously. Conor McGregor, 1, earns another title in the UFC. What are the odds?
So let's go. Let's make it easier for you. Let's go percentage.
No, let's go odds.
You want to go odds?
Yeah.
All right.
Everything is 14-1.
I would say plus 350 that he wins another title in the UFC.
Plus 350. So you're saying there's not a great chance.
Yeah, that's almost like 4-1 odds. I don't think it's going to happen. I think the Conor McGregor of today is just a fundamentally different person than he was obviously a few years ago when he was winning all these titles, and especially as a fighter. I mean, the Conor McGregor who was in that fight against Khabib Nurmagomedov was not the same guy. I
would set that at plus 200.
Okay, so you like his chances better than I do.
A little bit. Earns a title in another organization.
I would set that at like plus 1,000. I don't think the UFC would ever, ever, ever let him go regardless of what happens.
I would say plus 750 for that one.
You think there's a chance they let him go?
I don't, but when you say other organization, like maybe he can go box and fight for like a boxing title. I don't know.
Win the 165-pound title of McGregor Promotions.
Maybe. How about Bare Knuckle FC, baby?
Oh, there we go. Now we're talking.
Never fights for a title in any organization again.
I would never fights. So I would say
this is different. This is not winning a title. This is fighting for a title.
But this is never fights. I would put it at plus 250 that he never fights for a title. I think he will fight for a title at some point again.
I would say
It's money. It's cash money. You can print money off that.
Plus 500. He's gonna fight for a title. I mean, his next fight will probably be for a title. I don't know if he'll win, but it might be for a title.
All right, let's keep things moving. Next up is coming from Secret MMA, who's asking actually a pretty good question. What's up with Nico Montano? Just curious, since they announced Valentina Shevchenko versus Jessica Eye for the 205 or 125-pound belt. What is up with Nico? I don't really have an answer to this, Mark. I mean, it seems as though from her social media that she is still very active. She's still training. So I don't know if she's just biding her time for the right matchup. But it seems like she's very much still in this. Yeah. And she's still a member of the UFC. She was only taken out of the rankings for inactivity. So
yeah, I don't know. I don't know the answer to this. And it seems like I've tried to contact her camp, and I've gotten a little bit of response back over the last few months, but not a whole lot. It does appear that she's healthier than she was toward the end of last year. She's kind of getting back to that. But I don't know when to expect her back. I mean, the UFC has to offer her fights contractually, I believe, every 3 months. So I imagine that she's getting offered fights, just maybe not the right timing or the right opponent for her. So I have a feeling we'll probably see her back before the end of the year. But I just don't know what. I mean, I'd love to talk to her, but she's been difficult to kind of
track
wrangle as far as media goes for a while. Obviously not a huge fan of doing a lot of media. So I would love to talk to her. I find her a very interesting person. She seems like a very nice person the times that I have talked to her. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know enough about this really.
Yeah. What's next?
From Graham Douglas. Bravo to the A-Side live chat. The #1 show on MMAfighting.com.
Number one.
Douglas. That's awesome. Question. Do either of you commend the UFC for being brave regarding extensive PED testing? Or do you feel that it has been unfair and ultimately, tip of the cap to Chuck, a failure? Said another way, do you feel a Bellator level of testing is better for MMA, or is the UFC level of testing better for MMA?
I mean, that's that's more of a broad question. That's interesting. I think for the UFC, having this level of testing is almost imperative, right? When you're the highest level in the sport, when you're sort of the flag bearer for the sport, the standard bearer with all the top talent, basically, you have to have some sort of drug testing program in place like this, a very stringent one. I think for a Bellator and for a Risen or a Ryzen, sorry, I know that gets you one championship. Correct. One championship or whoever, I think you can get away with a lesser drug testing program because it doesn't matter as much. You're not the focal point when it comes to the world's view of this sport. For the UFC, it does seem to matter. The optics of that just matter a lot. So I would commend them for that. Obviously, the way it's been put in place, there's been a lot of issues, and so it's not been perfectly done by any stretch, but the effort is commendable.
I have a few thoughts on that, and I'll say off the bat, I do think that a relatively robust drug testing program is a great thing for the UFC. And I know that there have been some issues with USADA over the last few years since it started in 2015, but I don't think the answer to that is just get rid of USADA and go back to commission testing, because, I mean, let's be honest. I mean, most of the commissions are small commissions. They don't have the kind of funding and the resources to do any kind of full-scale out-of-competition testing. And if you're not testing out of competition, you might as well not be testing at all. So it's tough. It's a tough one. There's no. It's very hard to kind of hit the sweet spot as far as drug testing goes, because USADA has had times where people say that they're too strict, and they've had times like with this Jon Jones thing where people say that, oh, they're letting this guy go off easy. It's tough because the UFC also pays USADA, so there's that inherent conflict. The one thing that I will say about a drug testing program is that in an ideal world, it would be collectively bargained. There would be some kind of an association or a union in place with the fighters in the UFC, and it wouldn't just be something that gets imposed on the UFC fighters. It's something that they could bargain themselves with the UFC about what works and what doesn't work. And guess what? I would say 95% of fighters in the UFC want a robust drug testing program. They want it. So if they were to collectively bargain, I think that it would still be a very good program. because most fighters really do want some kind of oversight and some kind of testing. So that's the one thing I would say. I think a collectively bargained drug program would be best, although it doesn't seem like that will happen anytime soon.
Yeah. All right. Where are we going next?
Very quickly, it's about Dominic Reyes from the Pot God 4. We got Stonerhead and the Pot God on one live chat. That's great stuff. The future of Dominic Reyes. Does a convincing win over Volkan Oezdemir catapult Dominic Reyes into a title fight against Jon Jones? Also, Shaun, how did it feel fist bumping the new welterweight champion on his way out of the cage?
I need a Stonerhead and the Pot God spinoff from the A side.
I have a question. Did you fist bumped Usman?
Yeah, on his way out of the cage, he fist bumped me. I mean, he's a good dude. I think he was even surprised. I think he even surprised himself with how good he did that night. I just gave him a look like, wow, man. It was I don't know, it wasn't anything.
I've gotten because the press row is usually right in front of where the fighters walk out after their fights, and I've gotten like the fist bump thing, and it's like you shouldn't, as a member of the media, you shouldn't be fist bumping a fighter. But if a fighter is gonna ask you for a fist bump, what are you gonna do? Be a dick and not give him a fist bump back? Of course you have to, but it's always like an awkward experience. Like, okay, I mean, look, we're neutral, we're objective journalists, but if a dude puts his fist out,
there's still human beings that we know and we have spoken to a billion times.
Of course, and they were just in a freaking fight and they got their head punched in. So yeah, of course. But it's always awkward, like when the fist comes out. Anyway.
But yeah, what was the question? Volkan Oezdemir? Dominic Reyes.
Dominic Reyes. Just quickly, Shaun, what do you think? Could he get a title shot if he beats Volkan?
Oh man, I was gonna say no, and then I started thinking about it, and this is actually the first time I've actually sat down and thought about it, and it's not out of the realm of possibility. Jon Jones is fighting Thiago Santos next. He has made it very clear that he wants to be very active in 2019, fight 4 times. He's already gotten 1 out of the way. I'm sure we're going to have that Thiago Santos fight booked relatively quickly. If Dominic Reyes comes out here and just stonewalls Volkan Oezdemir and gets like a first-round knockout or something very impressive, I could absolutely see him becoming the next man in line, right? Because this is what Jon Jones wants. He just wants to face all these new challenges, new up-and-comers, line them up one by one. Dominic Reyes has gotten a nice little run in the UFC. It's not like he's still young in it. He is, I think, 4 fights now, 5 fights. I mean, hey, throw it to him. I actually think he might be next in line if he does something impressive this weekend.
Yeah, it's very possible, 100%. All right, let's move on.
Well, let me really quickly before we move on. I would prefer that. I would prefer Dominic Reyes get in there rather than getting a Johnny Walker thrown to the wolves way too quick. Because I know that's the other guy that people would name, and he is just, I just do not want to see that yet, man. Give him time. He doesn't even want it yet. Give him time to get his feet wet. Yeah,
I don't disagree with you. To Rob Holland, this is true or false. Let's go through these quick. Ready?
All right, let's do it.
True or false? Stipe Miocic doesn't fight until he gets the Cormier rematch.
Oh, I'm gonna say false because I don't know that he gets that rematch.
I'm gonna say false. I think DC fights Brock, and DC may not fight again. So Stipe is gonna have to fight somebody else if that's the way it goes down.
Yeah.
Gustafsson loses to Smith and retires.
That's an interesting one, and that one was actually something that surprised me on Monday when Alexander Gustafsson was on the MMA Hour, and he dropped a line sort of in the middle of the interview that was interesting and I guess surprising to hear from him. That on Anthony Smith saying, if I lose to this guy, maybe I don't have it anymore, more or less. That's an interesting look into his mind view or his mindset right now, his worldview as he heads into this fight, having just been dominated by Jon Jones, a rematch that he really just sought after for 5 years.
Yeah.
I don't think he will lose. I'm picking him to win that fight, but if he does lose, I mean, Alexander Gustafsson has flirted with retirement before. I think there is a small chance that he could retire with a loss here. So I would say false, but I think there is a possibility for true if the cards play out that way.
I'm gonna say false, and I don't know if he wins or he loses, but I don't think either way he retires. I don't think that happens. By the end of 2019, we will see Romero, Weidman, and Rockhold all at 205.
I'm gonna say false. I don't think we'll see Weidman there, but I hope we will see the other two.
I will say false. Rockhold's already going. It's 205. The other guys I don't know. I would say one of them probably will not. Maybe both of them won't. So I'm going to say false. The winner of Holloway versus Poirier does not fight Khabib.
False.
It's a good one.
I think that's false. The only way that doesn't happen is if Conor comes back and they just want to throw Conor in the rematch just because he's Conor McGregor. In which case, there will be riots on the streets.
I'm gonna say
on this show. And on this show, by the way.
I'm gonna say true.
You don't think they fight, Khabib?
I'm gonna say true. No.
What do you think happens then?
I have no idea.
What's your path there?
I don't know, but the way that things work in the UFC now, I'm putting my money on the unknown. And I think that if Khabib needs to fight on a certain date and one of those guys is not ready, they'll move someone on and have that person fight, just the way they did to Colby Covington. I'm gonna say true. You disagree. Anyway.
Yeah, I already said I disagree.
Tony Ferguson goes to either featherweight or welterweight. He ain't going to featherweight, Rob Holland. That ain't going to happen.
For real, don't even put that in the world. That dude walks around at like 200 pounds. I do not want to see that.
Featherweight, come on.
I say false. I don't think, unless it was for a title fight, I don't think he's going to make a move like that. I mean, he has put way too much work in at this point at the lightweight division and won way too many fights in a row to just abandon it now.
I would say false. I think he's going to stay lightweight. Ben Askren has a UFC belt wrapped around his waist by the end of 2019. Note, not by Dana White.
I like that note. Oh, man, it definitely could happen. There is now a very clear roadmap to it, right? Like if he fights the winner of this UFC London fight and Kamaru Usman beats Colby Covington, or even Colby Covington wins that fight, Ben Askren would be the obvious next guy in line if he won another fight. I'm going to say false. But I think true could definitely be it's 49-51% for me.
I'm gonna say false just because I don't know if Usman will fight 2 more times this year. So if Askren does get another win and Usman beats Covington,
look at you subtly picking Usman over Covington there.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Well, either way, I think Usman just had surgery, so he probably doesn't fight again until the latter half of the year. And the winner of that fight, whether it be Usman or Covington, I don't think they fight again before the end of 2019, so I'm going to say false. Just timing-wise. TJ Dillashaw loses his next fight, either the rematch with Cejudo or an actual title defense at bantamweight.
Ooh, God, that's an interesting one. Because, I mean, either way, you're fighting Cejudo or you're fighting Moraes. That is not a given. Either way, that's tough. I'm going to say true. I think Cejudo maybe has his number, and I think Marlon Moraes is a problem. He has looked insanely good at 135 of late. I'm going to say true. I believe in Marlon Moraes, to be honest.
I'm going to say false. I think he wins. I think he beats Cejudo at 135. I really think that it was the weight cut.
Yeah, but I say true because I wonder how that weight cut will continue to affect him. Because as we've seen with guys like Anthony Pettis, when he goes down to 145, that there are lingering, long-lasting effects that are still being felt months and even sometimes a year after a crazy weight cut like the one he did for 125. Fair. So I wonder if he's going to be at full strength the next time we see him at 135.
That's fair. Jones defends his belts 4 times in 1 calendar year. True or false?
He's got a shot, man. He's got a shot. If he wants it, he's got to get on the books very quickly with this Santos fight. I'm going to say false. I think it ends up being 3. But he wants it. He definitely wants it, and if he's motivated enough, I would not doubt him.
I'm gonna say false. I don't think timing wise it adds up because I think at the very earliest Jones doesn't fight until July, so I'll say false. Woodley fights for the middleweight championship in 2019.
That's an interesting one, but I think false.
Yeah, false.
It's too backed up. It's just too backed up.
Yeah, no, that's a hard one. Jose Aldo keeps knocking off #1 contenders and rides off into the sunset after 3 fights.
I think that could be true. I'm not going to lie. That Volkanovski one is a little worrisome. That Alexander Volkanovski is a problem. But if he gets past him, he might even be thrown into an interim title fight. He might ride off into the sunset with some kind of gold around his waist. As we've seen, Jose Aldo has still got it. No matter how long he's been in this, he's still got it.
Yeah, I'm gonna say true. I think so. I mean, you know what? Actually, I'm gonna quickly change my mind. I'm gonna say false because I don't know if he retires. If he keeps winning these fights, I don't know if he goes away in 3 fights. I really don't.
He might just go to Bellator or something.
I mean, maybe. I don't know, man. I don't know.
He is someone who has very traditionally always never played ball with the UFC, and he has done things his way. So it would not be surprising to me to have him go in free agency.
There's one more green question here. It's from Nick Diesel. Question is, if you work for the UFC and Bellator offers you Ryan Bader, Rory McDonald, and Michael Chandler for the Diaz brothers, do you take the trade?
No.
I don't know. No.
I would say no, but only because of Ryan Bader. I don't think the UFC is interested at all to get back in the Ryan Bader business. If as a fan of the sport, if that name was someone like an Aaron Pico or like a Michael Page or someone like that, they could maybe do something with. I would say yes, just because I would like to see the Diaz brothers again, and I don't feel like we're ever going to see them again in the UFC. And so it's just kind of wasting them, just have them sit there on the sideline.
I would say no, because then you have two huge draws going over to the competition.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking more on I was thinking more selfishly, just like I would like to.
Okay, that's fair. But if you're the UFC, you'd rather those two guys on ice on the shelf than going and popping big ratings numbers for Paramount Network or DAZN or something.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hey, let's try to squeeze in some Twitter questions. We are running low on time, but we're going to get to as many as we can. And I already have a few queued up here, so let's get one going from Brian Uhl. At first, he wants to know, is Diego Sanchez versus Damian Maia a good booking for UFC 237? This is an interesting one, Mark. I mean, Diego Sanchez just pulled off that win over Mickey Gall. He's out here calling for Damian Maia. Damian Maia wants it back. Our own Guilherme Cruz has been all over this story. I actually really like this fight. It's not one I would have thought of organically, but once these two guys said it, I think it makes a lot of sense for both of them. They've both been in this sport for so long. I love these sort of veteran fights.
I'm down for that fight. Yeah, sign me up. I mean, Diego Sanchez has looked pretty damn impressive. Damian Maia is a different level, different beast. But if that's what Sanchez wants, I'm down to watch that.
Diego ever lost by submission? I'm looking at this right now, but I haven't pulled it up yet. He has never once lost by submission. So the idea of making that guy say quit, the idea of making that guy say I'm done, that seems very difficult to do. So I would just like to see
hard to wrap your brain around that almost.
Let's keep moving. This next one from Kip at Edwards Joshua. My man asking about the GOAT Artem Lobov knocks out everyone and becomes a bare knuckle fighting legend, buy or sell. Marc Raimondi, Malignaggi versus Artem Lobov in bare knuckle is now a very real possibility that may enter our brains within the next 9 months. How excited are you for that?
Oh my God. The biggest fight outside the UFC of the year. The GOAT versus Paulo Malignaggi. Sign me all the way up for that fight. All the way.
All the way.
I enjoy watching the bare knuckle as is. And I think Artem Lobov versus Jason Knight next month it will be a really fun fight. But man, if you get, and can you imagine if Conor McGregor shows up to that fight and is in Artem's corner? Oh man, just inject that right into my veins.
It'll be interesting to see like an actual boxer in a bare knuckle fight. Like Paulo Malignaggi, people crap on him all the time, but like he was actually like a really decent boxer for like a while. And bare knuckle fighting is essentially boxing. There's no takedowns, there's no kicks. Like it's just a boxing match. I think Artem Lobov is biting off a little more than he could chew if that fight happens, to be honest.
Man, I just want to see that fight. I think it'll actually do really well.
I think it'll do
Fight TV or wherever they. I mean, I think Fight TV has the broadcast rights for bare knuckle, but man, that would be fun.
I think that would crush any kind of metrics over like even a UFC Fort Lauderdale or wherever you want to.
Damn well might, man. It damn well might. I like I like how they're thinking at bare knuckle. And just to be clear, this is not the bare knuckle organization that didn't pay a bunch of their fighters. This is the one that actually has paid their fighters.
Yes,
the one that Beck Rawlings fights for, and a few other fighters, Chris Lytle, so Joey Beltran. But yeah, I dig it, man. I got one for you from Michael J. Orvieto. since we're coming up on when Daniel Cormier announced he will retire, which he's not going to do, as we know, what is his next move once he is healthy? Lesnar, DC versus Miocic 2, DC versus Jones 3.
I mean, I go none of the above. DC versus Ngannou. That's me. I think Francis Ngannou has surpassed Stipe Miocic in the pecking order just by virtue of staying active and what he's done to Curtis Blades and Cain Velasquez in back-to-back fights. If it's my choice, that's where we go. If not, do Jones 3 at heavyweight, although I don't think the UFC would pay Jon Jones enough money for that.
I think what's most likely is Cormier versus Lesnar International Fight Week in July. I think that's probably most likely. Although Lesnar is a wild card. Lesnar's a wild card. You don't know what he's going to do. WWE may come to him after WrestleMania, which is in about 3 weeks, and give him a huge amount of money to not go to the UFC. Although he can do both, which I think is probably still most likely. But WWE may say, hey, we really need you for, summer, whatever. I don't know. But I think that's probably most likely.
Yeah. Here, I have 2 more quick ones. We'll get to these, and then
let's be quick because I have Darren Till in 10 minutes.
Yeah, we'll be quick. 2 more real quick. This one's coming from Cuca Baluda. Hopefully I'm saying that right. Which Brazilian has what it takes to become a UFC champ? Lizu dos Santos or Vicente Luque? Who will be the champion, if any? Do they have a chance against top 5 fighters? And obviously, Lizu dos Santos just pulling off a crazy first-round submission, cut through Curtis Millender like a buzzsaw this past weekend. And he was sort of in this same mold as a Vicente Luque, where these guys were winning a lot of fights in very entertaining fashion. They were stopping these fights. They were winning these by crazy, vicious stoppages, and they just were not getting the love that I think most fighters would if they were on that type of streak. Was that the kind of breakthrough win that he needed, that Lizu dos Santos needed to start getting these type of names?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that was – I hope so. I mean, the guy is really good, and he's so entertaining. I don't know why he's under the radar. I think what really needs to happen is that he needs to commit to just calling himself Elizeu Capoeira. Enough of this Zaleski dos Santos business. Just stick to the nickname Renan Barão. That's not his real name. Barão is a nickname. Elizeu Capoeira. No one else should call him anything differently. That will help his marketing power right off the bat. Commit to that name.
Yeah, and I just answer the actual question before we move on. Who has a better shot at that top 10 or top 5, I guess? I don't know, man. That's a good question. I think they both have very good shots. I've been high on Vicente Luque for a while now. And I think he showed a lot of heart and a lot of aspects to his skill set in that Brian Barberena fight. But so I would side with Vicente Luque, but I think both of them have a very interesting shot and inject some more life. I don't know if it's much needed life, but it's more life into that crazy 170-pound division. Yep.
Both those guys are really fun to watch.
And then last one before we get to the promos. This one's coming from our good friend Jed Mashu, MMA Fighting Zone.
Let that guy onto our show.
And this is coming in all caps. He's got a bone to pick. Why is no one leading the charge for Anderson versus Robbie Lawler? You are all cowards.
I mean, Anderson still's got to fight. He's fighting Jared Cannonier in Rio in June.
No, Marc.
I'd watch that fight. I mean, sure. Why not? I mean, I think Lawler still has more to do in the welterweight division. I don't know if it makes sense for Lawler right now, but I mean, he arguably won that fight against should have won that fight against Ben Askren.
I see how it is, Marc. Anderson Silva loses a fight and you jump off the bandwagon so hard. You are a coward, like Jed says.
Wow.
You okay over there?
Yeah, someone's spamming my phone. Singapore number. I don't know if this is Darren Till or what, but
all right. Well, hey, let's get to the promo and then we will get out of here for this week. You want to go first?
Yeah, I'll start. So Derek Lewis had a fight against Junior Dos Santos on Saturday night at UFC Wichita, lost by second round TKO. And we saw him double over in pain after getting kicked in the gut by Dos Santos. It was a little bit of a disappointing performance, but Dos Santos is still one of the best heavyweights in the world. Yesterday, I spoke to Derek's coach, Bob Perez, longtime coach from Houston at Main Street Muay Thai and Boxing down there, and told me that Derek Lewis was injured in going to that fight. He had a knee injury. He didn't ultimately get cleared by doctors to fight, but it was acting up during the fight. He said he was in a wheelchair after the fight in the back. The knee completely locked up, and it's just been an issue for him for about a month, and he's going for extra tests on March 18th. So that's the facts of the story. The amount of negative feedback that I got on my Twitter after writing that story was ridiculous, like unconscionable. The venom and bile that fans have. Yes.
Hold on. Am I about to get a classic Marc Raimondi against the fans rant?
You might.
Oh, yes. Let it go.
I just don't get it how Derek Lewis a few months ago, his balls was hot and he was the biggest thing going. He was the biggest thing going. He was an Instagram phenomenon. Everyone loved this guy. And now all of a sudden he admits to, like, his coach admits, not even him. It's not even him giving excuses. His coach is saying that he was injured going to the fight. And all of a sudden, oh, he's making it up, or it's BS, or he's terrible. This is ridiculous. Like, what is it with MMA fans where it's so up and down? It's just, if you win, you're the best fighter ever. If you lose, you're the worst fighter ever. It's just crazy. And then you say, God forbid, you say you have an injury and you're looking for excuses. I mean, it's just the hot and cold of this fan base is just crazy to me. It's the same guy. This is the same guy. This is the balls is hot guy. He's hilarious. We love him. We love him. And now all of a sudden he's dog shit because he admitted to having an injury in an interview. I mean, no one's looking for excuses. He's not saying looking for excuses. Facts are the facts of the facts. If he was injured, he was injured. I believe him. It's just it just blow. I woke up to all these things on my mentions. I'm like, what? So ridiculous. Like, get a freaking life, people. This guy fights in a cage for a living. He trains for a living. Of course they're going to get hurt. I mean, come on.
Do you feel good? Did you get that off your chest?
No, I don't feel good. I don't feel good, Shaun. I feel awful.
I will say, for a guy who, I believe him, obviously his coaches, I don't think they're going to make that up. I don't understand why you would be throwing so many flying kicks and crazy kicks if your knees hurt.
Derek Lewis, who the hell knows? Who knows?
Fair. That's fair.
Derek Lewis. This is a man that went out and said on one of the highest rated pay-per-view of all time, he took his shorts off and said his balls was hot. So you're going to question his decision-making in a fight?
All right. Well, I will take over before you get yourself fired because I see you just sweating over there. You're so fired up. I want to talk about something from this past weekend as well. And we didn't get asked about this. So in particular, I've said this before, but our world in this crazy MMA world, this crazy MMA space, everything moves so fast. It is so easy for performances and really good showings to get forgotten as we move on to the next. And so I like to sometimes highlight something that flew under the radar and really just celebrate it one more time before the conversation moves on. And very quietly, this one man has emerged as one of the most surefire, bang for your buck, get you out of your seat action fighters in this sport. And he did it again on Saturday, and we didn't even mention him once on this entire show. I'm talking, of course, about Niko Price, man, the hybrid. You got a 29-year-old welterweight out here who has evolved into just a genuine joy to watch every time out. And at this point, you look at what this guy has done. 6-2 UFC record, all first and second round submissions, finishes. Even in the losses, it is a true Diaz fashion in which this guy fights, kill or be killed. And he comes out at UFC Wichita after a tough 43-second KO loss, new coaching staff, new nutrition program, and he just burns the house down with his fight against Tim Means. And that ended up being overshadowed a bit because of the nasty injury that Tim Means suffered, and obviously we hope Tim is okay. But what a fight, man. They are throwing big shots, trading in the pocket. They're slapping each other left and right, Diaz style. And then this guy basically crow cops Tim Means with a right hook. And you know how you become one of my guys? You slap fools in the cage, you dead them, and then you get on the mic, and the first thing you say is violence as loud as you can. That is how you become one of Shaun Al-Shatti's guys, Niko Price. Incredible performance. And I know we need to go. So just one last thing. What do you think of this, Marc? I have an idea. Niko Price versus Mike Perry next. Who says no?
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah.
I'm down with
you like that, don't you?
That's some wild Florida-ish, my man. That's some wild Florida man is going to get a beating, one or the other.
Well, hey, that is what I want next. But in the meantime, well done, Niko.
You got a UFC Sunrise.
There you go. There you go. In the meantime, well done, Niko. Bonus well deserved. I cannot wait to see you guys or see your next one. I hope you guys have been giving Niko a lot of love here on social media because he deserves it. And that one should not just go away 2 days after the fact. That was a crazy fight. And that's about it, Marc. This has been another episode of the A-Side Live Chat Podcast. We thank you guys so much for joining us today. Tons of great questions. We will be back again next week at the same time, same place. Replay of this show is going to go up immediately within the next hour or two. YouTube replay will be up within minutes. And hey, that's about it for us. My name is Shaun Shotty. That man is Marc Raimondi over there. You have anything on your way out, man?
I got Darren Till calling me about 5 times during the show.
All right. Well, hey, have yourself a wonderful rest of your week. Y'all, we love you guys. Enjoy the fights. Enjoy your weekend. We will see you next Wednesday. Peace.
Peace out.